The Ghovari arrived on a Tuesday, which was already an inauspicious start. Tuesdays at the shop were slow. I had 4 regulars by 8, a table of transit workers who always ordered the same thing and never tipped badly, and by 9:30, Corporal had usually migrated from the mat by the door to his preferred spot under booth 7, where the heating element in the floor ran a little warm. He was 11. He weighed 34 kilograms on a good day, more when he'd been eating the crusts the regulars slipped him, which was most days. He had opinions about cold mornings, which was why the mat by the door only ever held him for the first hour of a shift before the booth claimed him. I had stopped arguing about it somewhere around his 3rd year. Booth 7 was his. I heard them before I saw them, the particular click of Ghovari compliance boots on the pavement outside, that precise military heel strike they all use, the one that's supposed to announce authority before the door opens. 3 of them. The lead official was tall even by Ghovari standards, which is saying something, with the gray-green shoulder markings of a senior assessor and a handheld compliance instrument that probably cost more than my espresso machine. The other 2 carried clipboards and the flat, slightly bored expressions of people who had done this many times and expected to keep doing it indefinitely. Transit Zone Certification. Every business on the lower concourse was getting one that month. I'd had the paperwork for 6 weeks. Then, Orla, the lead official said, not looking up from her instrument. She was scanning the counter, the back wall, the menu board. "That's me," I said. She made a note. The 2 juniors spread out, one toward the kitchen, one along the booths. Standard pattern. I stayed behind the counter and started a fresh pot, because there was nothing else useful to do, and because the transit workers at table 3 were going to want refills in about 4 minutes, regardless of what was happening. The scan took 11 minutes for the main room. I know because I watched the clock. They logged the ventilation grille, the secondary power tap, the fire suppression nozzle that had been pointed slightly wrong for 3 years, and that I kept meaning to fix. They logged the transit workers, who were given compliance tags without ceremony, and went back to their eggs. They logged the 2 regulars at the counter, who were given tags with slightly more ceremony, because one of them said something in Ghovari that I don't speak, but that made the junior assessor's neck go stiff. Then they reached booth 7. The junior on that side of the room stopped. He looked at Corporal. He looked at his clipboard. He looked at Corporal again. Corporal was on his side, the arthritic hip up, chin on the warm floor tiles. He was breathing slowly. He might have been asleep. With Corporal it was sometimes hard to tell, because his version of asleep and his version of paying careful attention looked almost identical from the outside. The tells were small, the angle of the ears, whether the brow was moving, whether the end of his tail was doing that slow, single-tick wag that meant he was tracking something. The tail was ticking. "This is domestic fauna," the junior said. "Not to me. To the room, in the way compliance people talk when they want something entered into the record." "He's a dog," I said from behind the counter. "He's been coming here since he was a puppy. I own him." Non-compliant presence. Domestic fauna must be registered and removed from active transit zone commercial premises prior to certification. He made a note. He looked at Corporal. He nudged Corporal's back foot with the toe of his boot, lightly, the way you'd move a bag someone had left in the aisle. Corporal opened one eye. Just the one, the left. He turned it on the junior assessor with the particular quality of attention that I had spent 11 years watching, and that I can only describe as the absence of urgency, not laziness, not sleepiness, not friendliness. Just a very calm, very complete assessment of the situation, delivered from the floor, at boot level, by an animal who had already finished thinking about it. The junior assessor did not nudge him again. The lead official crossed the room. She held her instrument over Corporal and ran a scan. The instrument hummed, the way they do, cycling through the biological classification index. I refilled the transit workers without being asked. The instrument hummed for longer than it usually would. I knew this because I had watched them scan the transit workers, and that had taken maybe 4 seconds each, and I had counted to 12 before I looked up. The lead official ran it again. The instrument output was a small screen on the side of the device. I couldn't read it from the counter, but I watched her face, and her face did something I'd never seen a Ghovari compliance official's face do, which was nothing at all. A careful, deliberate nothing. She called the second junior over. He had a different instrument. Older model, I thought. Bulkier. He held it over Corporal and ran his own scan. Corporal yawned. It was a long yawn, the kind that starts at the back of the jaw and rolls all the way forward, showing the back teeth and the tongue and everything else. Then he put his chin back on the floor tiles and closed the eye. The second instrument finished its cycle. The junior holding it looked at the screen. He looked at the lead official. He looked at the screen again. His voice, when he spoke, was very flat, the way voices get when the speaker is choosing each word with a great deal of care. Category indeterminate, he said. Request for secondary review flagged. Biological threat index. He paused. Suspended pending classification. Nobody moved for a moment. The lead official looked at Corporal. Corporal's tail did the one-tick thing, just once, and stopped. I have thought about what happened next for a long time, and I think the most accurate way to describe it is that the lead official made a series of very small decisions, each one following the previous one, with the quiet logic of someone who has run a calculation and arrived at an answer she did not go looking for. She straightened her instrument. She looked at her clipboard. She looked at the junior, who was looking at his instrument, and not at Corporal, which was probably wise. She looked, briefly, at me. The premises are compliant, she said. I nodded. The certification will be filed this afternoon. She made a note. The domestic fauna, she said, with a small pause before those two words that I thought was interesting, is not flagged. I appreciate that, I said. She nodded once, crisply, in the way that Ghovari officials nod when they are wrapping up and do not wish to revisit anything. The two juniors fell in behind her. The one with the older instrument did not look at Corporal again as he passed the booth. The one who had nudged Corporal's foot looked once, quickly, from a distance, and then looked at the door. They left. The boots clicked back down the pavement, precisely, and then they were gone. The transit workers at table 3 were looking at me. I lifted the pot. They held out their mugs. I came around the counter and crouched down next to booth 7. Corporal had his eyes closed, the hip up, the slow breathing. He looked, to anyone who didn't know him, like a dog sleeping off a Tuesday morning. I scratched behind his ear, the spot just behind the left one where the fur grew in a small whorl. Good boy, I said. The tail did the one-tick thing. I went back behind the counter. The certification came through at 2:30. There were no items flagged. Corporal slept through the lunch rush, through the mid-afternoon lull, through the point where I turned the chairs up on the tables and mopped under all of them except booth 7, because I always did booth 7 last, and because by the time I got there he had shifted to his other side, and I decided it wasn't worth it. I have a copy of that certification form framed above the register. It lists every logged item in the premises: the ventilation grille, the fire suppression nozzle, the regulars, the transit workers, the menu board, the espresso machine. It does not list Corporal. The Ghovari Transit Authority has very good record keepers. They log everything. If something isn't in the log, it's because someone with gray-green shoulder markings made a considered professional decision not to put it there. I think about that sometimes, on Tuesday mornings, while the pot runs and Corporal migrates to booth 7 and gets his hip over the warm part of the floor. He's 12 now. The hip is worse. He takes a little longer to get up than he used to. One of the transit workers asked me once where I'd gotten him. I told her, I found him outside the loading dock 7 years before she started coming in the rain, eating something I preferred not to examine. I brought him inside, gave him a bowl of water and a heel of bread, and he never left. I don't know how old he was when I found him. The vet gave me a range of 4 years, which is the kind of answer you get when the dog is simply old and has been old for a while. He has been indefinitely old for as long as I have known him. The transit worker thought about this and then said, "So, he's just always been there." "That's about right," I said. "Everything else is the same.